Okay guys, so today I have another deck profile review. This one is also from the NAWCQ. Now I wanted to do this one because the previous one that I did was a runic version, and runic plays very differently to the other variants. This is not a topping list. I don't think that a single White Forest variant topped the entire event. So just for some quick context in case you've not been following, the NAWCQ is one of the few events that you can consider a top tier event, and so you have a pretty good idea of what decks are actually the best decks. So Fiendsmith had a 25% representation rate with all entrants, so all 2,635 or however many people, and that 25% converted into a 45% in the top 64. So that is how you can tell that you are in a tier 0 or close to tier 0 meta. Whereas Yubel and Tenpai also had favorable conversion rates, but not nearly anything like 25 to 45%. So I should also say that there were not many White Forest decks that entered the competition. It's a little hard to tell from Konami's pie charts because I think they may have been grouping the few variants as runic builds or just in other. So yeah, it's worth noting that if there are barely any people that enter with a deck, there are probably not going to be many people to top either, but also the deck is just worse than Snake Eyes and Yubel. And, you know, against Tenpai, maybe that's probably the meta matchup that is the least bad for us. Okay, so this is a White Forest Toy centur-ion build, and I want to talk about some of the choices this guy has made. Obviously, the link to the description of the original deck profile will be below, so you can check that if you want to watch the video. We see kind of standard ratios, except that he's playing 2 Sylvie and 2 Rusia. A lot of lists were cutting the Sylvie and the Rusia to 1 to make space for other engine pieces. But if you're playing a very, very tiny centur-ion package, you have a little bit more space. So he's on 2 Sylvie, 2 Rusia. Where this helps, I've noticed, is especially if you are in a grind. And if you've already used both your 1 Sylvie and your 1 Rusia, you have no targets for a Stellar later in the game. And so this card actually becomes quite subpar, whether you get it out of the grave or you draw 1 later in the game. So I almost want to play at least 2 and 1 in most builds just for that reason. The Rusia obviously is a solid card to draw as an extender, even though it's not actually a starter. Usually you'll be able to get something on field where you can extend. So I think these are pretty good ratios overall. 2 Tails, I don't really have much of an opinion on this. I think you can play between 1 and 3, depending on what the rest of your build looks like. I love 3 Soldier in any build that can get away with it. I don't know why people choose to play only 1 or 2. The deck is a different deck if you access the toy cards, and if you don't have them, the deck is extremely mediocre. So I like this. He could play Rota over Tails, and I think that like, you could argue that the Rota is higher impact than the Tails, but, you know, I don't know. Just a thought. For the centur-ion package, so something interesting to note here is that he is opting to play Wake Up over the Gargoyle. Now, for a lot of people in the Discord that have been talking about the centur-ion version, one thing that comes up all of the time is people are saying, you know, why not play more cards to make the ceiling better? Like, why not play Wake Up and also Gargoyle, or even multiple Trudea or Primera in case you draw one, so you can still bring it out from the deck and whatever? And the problem with playing more of these cards is that these cards are not actually good. This card is the best card out of the standard cards played, and Emblema Oath is by far the best card in the entire centur-ion archetype, because it is both a starter and an extender, which is something that most decks don't normally have. Snake Eyes players are very spoiled with having a bunch of starter extenders, and Stand Up and Emblema are the starter extenders of this deck. Now, you have to play a Stand Up as part of the combo, so you have to play at least 1, and the more cards you play, the less space you have for non-engine or engine pieces. But the problem with playing cards like Phalanx and Wake Up is that these are bricks going second, and this is an extremely conditional extender going first. So you have to already be playing where you have a centur-ion card in your monster zone. So this says if a monster, well, it doesn't have to be centur-ion, sorry. It says if a monster card is face up in your spell and trap zone, you can declare level 4 or 8, special summon 1 centur-ion token with a declared level, but it cannot be used as fusion or link material. Now, this is kind of annoying because with the Millennium cards, if you were trying to combine these, you technically could place a monster card into your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell, and then this would be live. And so it would be much harder to brick with this card if you were combining it with the Millennium stuff. but then you can't link it off, which would be insane. You could so easily go into the Fiendsmith engine like Closed Heaven or whatever with the Millennium card and this card. So just this restriction is very weird. And basically what it means is that this is really a combo piece that you don't want to draw. And then the really useful part of this is during your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, send a centur-ion card from your deck to the graveyard, except itself. And the reason that is good is because if you get nibbed, you can dump the Phalanx, and in the end phase, the Phalanx can bring back your Synchro 12, and that can still place a centur-ion card into your spell and trap zone, and you can still Calamity Lock on your opponent's turn through nib or whatever other hand traps you ate. So that is a super solid utility of this card. But I think if you are going to play this card, you should be choosing between this or Gargoyle. If you're playing both those cards and also the Phalanx, you're really just begging to draw bricks going second especially. And then have like pretty subpar gas going first. The Phalanx makes a little bit more sense if you're already playing the Wake Up because the Wake Up can dump the Phalanx to play around Nib. Whereas if you were just playing Gargoyle, then you can not play the Phalanx or the Wake Up, or you can put both of them in your side deck. That's what I think is good. And so then you'd be on like a 4-card package with 1 Primera, 1 Tridea, 1 Stand-Up, 1 Gargoyle. I think that is probably better overall in terms of your draws. But the main advantage of this in the current meta is that this plays around Shifter way better. Because the Auxilla, unlike, where is it? The Auxilla, unlike Legatia, can bring back from the banished, not just the grave. And so if you get shifted, you can still make this card, and you can place the Primera from your banished into the spell and trap zone in the end phase. And then once you have set the Wake Up in your opponent's turn, once you bring out the Primera, you can Wake Up and then go into Crimson Dragon. And then you can Calamity Lock or Blazar or Supernova Dragon or whatever. So I don't know, like to me, if you're going into a major event where, unless you think Tenpai is going to be super represented, because now they have a reason to main 3 Shifter, and I may do a video on Tenpai because I think they're a little bit more interesting now than before. I think that it's probably not worth it, and you should just play Gargoyle instead, or you don't play any of the hard bricks and you just go Stand Up, Trudea, Primera, that's it. Or you can play the Millennium cards, none of which are bricks, and also can go into Crimson Dragon because they have level 8s and 6s, and those work really well. So, yeah, I don't know. These cards are ceiling. They make it easier to play through things depending on the hand you draw, but you can also draw worse and then play through less things. So there's a toss-up there, and I feel like I don't really like these cards that much anymore. I feel like the meta is way too far ahead of us to be playing cards that aren't amazing to draw. Like, the moment you're telling yourself you want to play more Primeras or Trudeas because if you draw it, it ruins your combo or you have to play awkwardly to fix the combo, that's when you know the card is not good. Here we see the 1 Veiler because it's searchable off the Arciela. I like that, even if you're not on a hand trap build. Then we have 3 high-impact hand traps in Droll and Lockbird, which, honestly, I think this card is not actually that good this meta if people were to play around it. But if people aren't playing around it because the meta is fresh, then the card is good. And at major events, a lot of your deck building decisions are basically meta calls, so this seems good. The Ash and the Imperm to me seem like pretty strange choices though, because I feel like if you're going to be on Thrust and Talents anyhow, and then you have a non-engine slot dedicated to going first only in Silhouette Trick, you should probably be playing only high impact cards. So I am a huge fan of playing Dark Ruler and Evenly in the main deck, and the 3 Thrust and the 1 Talents. And so that way, if you're going first, the 3 Thrust and the 1 Talents are fine on the dice roll, and even if they don't control a monster when Thrust is live, you still can get the Woes. Or if you're playing the Centur-ion cards, you can still get the Phalanx. So I really like these cards, either side of the dice roll. And then Dark Ruler and Evenly are obviously not useful going first, Evenly being worse because you can use the Dark Ruler later. But they're just a better way to hedge your bets against way better decks with way better economy that you will lose hand trap wars to. So I really don't like this. The only scenario I feel like the Ash is considerable is if you were playing a lot of Tenpai, or if you want to put the Ash in the side deck because you don't want to lose to the Kaimin in the battle phase against Tenpai. I think that's understandable. Either you think there's a lot of Tenpai in your meta, or you just want it for the Tenpai in the side. I feel like that makes sense. And then with Imperm, the thing about this card is a lot of people like to play droplets because they're like, okay, we agree that the Breaker's route is better than hand traps because we can't win hand trap wars against decks that are like 2 tiers above us. but they still play Droplet. And the thing is, if you do not have access to your toy engine, Droplet is horrendous in this deck. And if you do have access to the toy engine, the Droplet will still lose to Gimmick Puppet FTK, which a lot of breakers will lose to anyhow. And you will also lose to Calamity Locks, or you'll have to use an inefficient Droplet where if they have to Calamity in main phase, which is not always the case. Sometimes if they had a good hand and you're on breakers and you didn't interrupt them, they can Calamity you on your draw. But if they go into main phase because they need to bring out like their like Primera or whatever, you only have time to set a single toy card. And if you drew the box and not the soldier or the tank, then you don't even get a chance to resolve it. So it's like, are you really going to say that Droplet is good in the chance, the like 10-ish% chance that you draw both Droplet and soldier and they wait until the main phase to Calamity Lock you? That's just not good. But if you really want to play Droplet, which is a good card, I think having the toy stuff and also a bunch of other stuff that is good to send, like Black Goat Laughs, which if you're playing that card, Thrust makes that card better in a way because going first, you can set the Black Goat Laughs as one of your options, and then going second, you can discard it, and it's one of the few things that you actually do want to discard going second because it gives you the way to play around stuff like Appaloosa, Little Knight, or whatever, or Desiree. So yeah, if you're playing stuff like Black Goat Laughs and Imperm, like actual good chainable stuff to make the droplets better, I feel like droplets is better in this deck. If you're just going to throw in droplets because it's a breaker, then it's usually bad. Especially if you're on hand traps, because then you're going to have like so few cards left to play with. Okay, anyhow, I've talked too much about the extra deck. Let's see, how am I going? 11 minutes? Okay, let me try to go more quickly. So in the extra deck, we see the standard 1/1/1. I feel like this is not going to change because you can cycle through these. We see the Silhouette Rabbit. Now, this card is better in the Centur-ion version for sure, because the Centur-ion monsters do trigger this effect. So let's see, where does it say? Wait, why can I? If this card is link summoned, you can set a continuous trap from your deck with an effect that special summons itself as a monster, and then can't be used as link material this turn. If a card in the spell and trap zone is special summoned to the monster zone, except during the damage step, you can target one spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy it. So this works with both the Centur-ion cards and the Millennium cards, which is worth noting because actually, with the Millennium cards, you could even argue in some cases that this could help you break certain boards if it was spell like a spell or trap that was holding you back, or like a floodgate that allowed you to get far enough. But anyhow, the point is that this is better with these cards because they give you additional ways to activate it. He's chosen to play Silhouette Trick instead of Azirun. I think both cards are good, but you have to remember that this is a trigger effect, so this will activate on a new chain, the negation, and so it means there are a lot of things that you cannot negate with this because the negation only happens in a different chain. So you just have to remember that. And he's choosing to main it instead of side it, which is, I don't like that. I feel like you have Phalanx, Wake Up, and Hat Trick as at least 3 cards that are not very useful going second. If you count Woes, which you have to play no matter what, you're getting to 4 cards that you don't want to see going second. And then if you're being nitpicky, these are also not good to draw because they don't help you gas through things. Normally, if you are using a normal summon, you want to be using a White Forest normal summon, and you're trying to bait things until you can be able to resolve the Estella or whatever. So these are additional, not bricks, but like less than optimal draws going second. So I feel like this is just too much. They're just too much cards that are good going first. So both Legatia and Auxilla, the good thing about not playing Fiendsmith cards is you have so much space in the extra deck to play a bunch of stuff. Crimson with Calamity and Cosmic Blazar. The Draco Berserker, this is cool to see because I hadn't seen anyone else playing this when I started making videos including this card. But this is great going second. It's great in simplified game states. It is good going first if you have extra bodies and you still want to make something else. So I like it. Blackwing Assault Dragon. So this is a tuner synchro monster like Silvera or Arciela, and then a non-tuner monster. So this is actually pretty easy to make. Now this says each time your opponent activates a monster effect, place a black feather counter on this card when that effect resolves, and if you do, inflict 700 damage to your opponent. And then during your opponent's turn, you contribute this card with 4 or more black feather counters on it, destroy all cards on the field. So this is kind of interesting. It can help in time, and it gives you like a weird type of board wipe in your opponent's turn where you tribute itself. So your opponent kind of has to play into it. So I feel like it's not actually that good, but it's interesting. Then obviously Chaos Angel, because you have to play it. He's choosing to play Masquerena, which I have not found to be worth the space so far, but okay. Little Knight and then Baguska. I guess this is mainly just for Shifter. And then here we have Crossout for Nib and D-Barrier, Cosmic, Feather Duster, the Evenly that I would have mained, the Black Goat that I would have mained, and then a Call By and an Anti-Spell. I feel like if you're not playing Beatrice and you're not playing Pot of Prosperity, this is so sacky that I almost wouldn't even play this because the chance of drawing this is super, super unlikely. I'd probably rather just play more Breakers or something else, some other type of non-engine. Yeah, so okay, that's his deck profile. In my personal opinion, if I were to be making adjustments to this, but still trying to stick to the core idea of the deck without changing it too much, I would say, okay, we've decided we're playing the centur-ion cards, and we can't tolerate too many cards that are bad going second, so I would probably side the Silhouette Trick. I would probably... you already have ways to play around Nib and D-Barrier. I would say if you are going to play Ash, you put it in the side against Tenpai. You probably put the Evenly in the main. And I also think that you have to accept the fact that your deck is not that good. And so you just have to play a lot of Breakers. And so I would probably change it to something that is a little closer to this. I also feel like this is a version of the deck that can play Gallant Granite. Now, what you should remember if you were playing Centurion versions is that often you are going to be using your resources to go into a Crimson Dragon play. And so making Gallant Granite is a lot less common in these types of decks. However, I don't really value the Masquerena or the Blackwinged Assault Dragon too much, to be honest, because Masquerena usually is not going to be going into Silhouette. It's going to be going into Little Knight. But a lot of the boards that I would be making... would use Gallant Granite to go into SB anyhow. And so I feel like the Masquerena just giving you a Little Knight but taking an additional body is not worth it. Whereas the Gallant Granite card, you're using this to go into the SB anyhow. And it would allow you to play a Nib in the main. And so you could have the Veiler and the Nib in the main, a high impact lingering floodgate like Droll. And then you would have all of your floodgates, or not your floodgates, sorry, your board breakers here. And then the only other thing that I would be thinking about is like, if we take out, if we were to, hypothetically, if we were to side deck the Phalanx and the Centurion and put in just one Gargoyle instead, we would have one additional space without making too many other modifications. And that would allow us to also put in a Black Goat Laughs, which is searchable off the thrust. So, you know, like think of a weird scenario where maybe you already have access to woes or you hard drew the woes. And so you want a good target for your thrust. And you bring out Black Goat and you're like, okay, I can either leave it set for use in my opponent's turn or I can just send it off of whatever card. And it's fine in the grave. So like the thrust wasn't lost. It wasn't wasted on something that you could already have gotten by searching the woes or whatever. And so I guess this is really just up to how much do you think you're going to play against Shifter. And in my opinion, Tenpai is, you can Calamity Lock under the Shifter with the Wake Up Centurion, but I just feel like if you're not going to go into that matchup too often, I would rather just play the Black Goat here. And then, let's see. I think I would either put in a Reinforcement of the Army or I would put in another Tails. I don't know which one would be more high impact between these two, or you could put in another Black Goat Laughs. Actually, let's do that. So, because we want a little bit more non-engine. Let's say we did something like this. I feel like this is probably what my take on the deck would be like. Yeah. So anyhow, that's my thoughts on the deck profile. Again, the link to the original profile will be in the description below. Let me know if you have any opinions or if you think there's anything that I didn't take into consideration that would be worse after making these changes. And thanks for watching.